75 years old. And I just realized about 3 weeks ago that I have been careful my entire life. Careful. That word used to feel like a compliment. It doesn't anymore. I was sitting at Thanksgiving dinner. This was November, my daughter's house in Columbus. The one with the yellow kitchen she repainted twice because the first color was too cheerful, and she thought it made the room feel dishonest somehow. And my granddaughter Maya, she's 11, she's got this notebook she carries everywhere, and she asked me what I wanted to be when I was her age. What did I want to be? And I opened my mouth, and I had nothing. Not because I forgot, because I realized I had spent so long becoming what made sense that I had no idea what I had actually wanted. None. I sat there at that table with the smell of rosemary and butter in the air, and my son-in-law laughing at something on the other side of the room, and I thought, I cannot answer an 11-year-old's question about my own life. That's when I knew something was deeply, permanently wrong. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here because I think some of you are doing exactly what I did, and you still have time to stop. I didn't, not fully, but you might. Here's what I mean by careful. I graduated top of my class. I took the job that had the better pension, not the one that made my hands shake with excitement. I bought the house in the suburb that held its value. I married a woman I respected enormously and loved moderately, and I told myself that was the mature version of love, the grown-up version. I never moved to Portland when I was 32, even though I had a job offer there, and I used to fall asleep thinking about what my life would look like from a different coast. I said no to a business partner in 1986, a man named Dennis Garrity. We went to grad school together. Big ideas, loud laugh, always late to everything. He wanted me to come in on a small software company he was starting in Austin. I said no because I had a mortgage. Dennis sold that company in 2001 for $42 million, and I was at my desk in Cincinnati, and I had a very good pension. I tell people that story and they wince. They think that's the worst of it. It isn't. The worst of it is smaller than that. The worst of it is the Tuesday in 1994 when I didn't say anything at the dinner table because the conversation felt too loaded. The worst is my son Patrick at 17 telling me he wanted to study art, and me saying, very gently, very reasonably, let's think about what you can do with that, and watching something go out in his face. Just go out, like a light. He's an accountant now, good at it, never talks about painting. I have never once asked him if he misses it, because I am afraid of what he'll say, and afraid of what it would mean about me. That's the worst of it, not the $42 million. There's this idea that psychologists talk about. Carl Jung wrote about it first, and other thinkers picked it up later. The unlived life. The idea that we all carry inside us a version of the person we never became. The choices we didn't make, the paths we didn't take. They don't disappear. They stay with you. They become a kind of ghost. And after 50, after 60, after 70, that ghost gets louder. Not quieter, louder. The life you didn't live starts pressing up against the life you did, and the contrast becomes almost unbearable. I can feel mine. I can feel who I might have been if I had said yes more, if I had been willing to be embarrassed, to be wrong, to be the person in the room who looked like they were reaching for something they might not get. The person I never became is right here. He's been here the whole time. And here's the thing that nobody told me at 40. Nobody. The same fear that kept me from moving to Portland, from calling Dennis back, from taking the job that had no guaranteed future. That exact same fear showed up everywhere else. It wasn't just about work. It was about everything. The same caution that kept me from betting on myself also kept me from being real with the people I loved. I never had the hard conversation with my wife, not the real one, not until it was too late to matter. I never told my kids who I actually was underneath all the competence and the steadiness. I kept showing them the capable version, the reliable version, the man who always knew what to do. And they grew up with a very organized father and a very distant one, not because I didn't love them, because I was afraid to let them see me wanting something I didn't have. Afraid to let anyone see that. Playing it safe isn't just a career decision. It's a way of being in the world. It teaches your nervous system to flinch before anything uncertain, and eventually you flinch at everything. You flinch at the conversation that might go badly. You flinch at the friendship that might ask too much of you. You flinch at your own reflection when it looks back at you with questions you haven't answered. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Carla Whitmore. She was 53 when her kids left home. Youngest one headed to college in North Carolina, husband traveling for work 4 days a week. And she found herself standing in a very quiet house in Scottsdale, Arizona, wondering what she was going to do with the next 30 years. She had been a teacher, good one, but she'd always wanted to open a small ceramic studio, not a business exactly, just a place, something with her hands. She had notebooks full of sketches going back to her late 20s. She almost did it twice and talked herself out of it both times. Too risky, not the right moment. The kids need the stability. When her youngest left, she had that empty nest moment that a lot of you know. That particular quiet that isn't peaceful, it's just hollow. And she did something that terrified her. She signed a 1-year lease on a small space in a strip mall. She told no one except her husband because she was embarrassed to want something that badly, in case it didn't work. The first 6 months were rough. She taught herself things she should have learned decades earlier. She made ugly things before she made beautiful things. And then, slowly, the studio started to fill. Not with customers at first, with her. With the version of herself that had been waiting since she was 28. She told me once, she said, "I spent 20 years being responsible for everyone else, and I forgot I was also responsible for myself, for the life I was supposed to build." She's 61 now. The studio is small. It doesn't make her rich, but she walks in the door every morning, and she feels like herself. She told me that's worth more than she has the math to calculate. You might be thinking, well, she was 53. That's different. That's young enough. I'm 58. I'm 63. I'm past that. And I want to push back on that thought right now because it is the same lie you've been telling yourself for 20 years, and it has cost you enough already. There's research, and I don't cite studies very often. I think people use data the way they use umbrellas, to stay dry rather than to go somewhere. But there's research out of Cornell and other places showing that what people regret most is not what they did, but what they didn't do. And the older we get, the more that ratio tips. The younger you are, you regret your actions. The older you get, you regret your inactions. The thing you didn't say, the risk you didn't take, the version of yourself you kept locked away because the timing was never quite right. And neuroscientists at UCL found that uncertainty feels worse than known bad outcomes. We'd rather have the certain bad thing than the uncertain possibly good thing. That's not a moral failing, that's wiring. But you can override wiring when you understand it. And here is what I wish someone had told me. Not at 75, not even at 50. I wish someone had told me at 42, standing in my driveway in the dark after everyone was asleep, thinking about Dennis Garrity and Portland and the art school in Florence I'd looked at when I was 26. I wish someone had said to me, the courage doesn't have to be enormous. It just has to be real. It doesn't have to be $42 million. It can be the ceramic studio in the strip mall. It can be the conversation you've been avoiding for 3 years. It can be admitting out loud that you chose the safe version and you're not sure you'd do it the same way again. That admission alone, just saying it out loud, is a kind of courage that changes things. Because the unlived life gets quieter when you stop pretending it isn't there. Not gone. Quieter. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at 50. The second act is real. I have watched people start over in their 50s and 60s and build something they love. Not always something big, not always something profitable, but something true. A woman I know named Ellen, 67 years old, retired school administrator in Vermont, spent 2 years learning to sail in her early 60s because she'd been terrified of open water her whole life. She's now crewing on a boat that does island-to-island charters in the Caribbean. She sends me photographs. She looks 20 years younger. Not because sailing is magic, because she stopped letting the fear make the decisions. A man named Robert, 59 when I met him, 20 years in corporate finance, woke up one morning and realized he had not had a single conversation in the last decade that he actually wanted to have. He quit. He became a high school history teacher in a small town in Oregon. The pay cut was devastating. The pension is gone. His kids thought he was having a breakdown. 5 years later, he told me it was the first time in his adult life he came home and didn't feel like he was disappearing. The starting over at 50, the midlife reinvention, it's not about drama. It's not about blowing everything up and moving to Bali. Most of the time, it's quieter than that. It's just deciding that the ghost you've been carrying, the life you didn't live, deserves at least a conversation. Deserves at least the question, what if? I'm not telling you it's easy. I'm not telling you it comes without cost. Dennis Garrity, by the way, went bankrupt twice before that company sold. There were 4 years in there where he was calling people for loans, where his marriage fell apart, where he wasn't sure he was going to make it. The $42 million version of that story has a chapter I always left out when I told it to myself. I left it out because it made my decision look more reasonable, and I needed it to look reasonable. But even knowing the bankrupt years, even knowing the hard version, I still think I should have said yes. Not because of the money, because it was something I actually wanted. And that's the only question left that matters. When you strip away what's safe and what's responsible and what makes sense at your age, at your income level, with your particular history and your particular fears, what is it you actually want? What did that 11-year-old you once were think life was going to feel like? And how far is that from where you are right now? I have a perfect resume. I mean that literally. Every job I ever held, I performed well. Every role I was given, I delivered. Every promise I made, I kept. And I am sitting here at 75 with a perfect record and a life that sometimes feels like it happened to someone I never quite got to meet. You are not me. You still have time I didn't use. That's not nothing. That's everything. Whatever it is you've been talking yourself out of, whatever version of yourself you've been keeping on hold until the conditions got better, the conditions are not going to get better. They're just going to get later. If you know someone sitting with that same quiet in their house, the one that isn't peaceful, the one that's just hollow, share this with them. And if something here landed somewhere real for you, leave a comment and tell me what it was. I read them. And if you want more conversations like this one, subscribe, because I'm not done talking yet. And I think you're not done listening.